Good evening. Thank you for coming to the Stoughton Public Schools Policy Subcommittee meeting, which is being held at the Stoughton School Committee's room. Today is February 20th, 2014, 7 o'clock. We have everybody has the agendas. I guess brought some extra copies if you don't.
Okay.
Need one?
Thank you.
Oh, maybe I didn't bring
Would
some.
you like me to make some? I can go make some.
I have one.
That's okay, we can
We
share.
can share, perfect.
The first item, what are the, Joyce felt, and I feel the same way, one of the ways of getting the public involved is to, through these subcommittees that they'll have more time to talk about.
You are
Am I
incorrect.
correct?
You are incorrect.
Oh, am I incorrect?
You are
Okay,
incorrect.
we'll
When-
debate
well,
that
when-
later.
well, can I just
go
answer?
ahead.
When I formed the standing subcommittees, we had a long discussion about whether these were committees that would involve the public or that they would not. And it turns out that we have the right to appoint special subcommittees on topics
Right.
to include the public for input, but that standing subcommittees were working committees of the school committee, and they did not include members of the public. Ad hoc committees were something else.
But
They
this
were-
is, I was just talking
Yeah.
about the public,
But the standing, no.
public input portion.
There is no
but,
public comment during a subcommittee, that's only during regular school
No,
committee
but
meetings.
we'll talk about, you wrote the core charter. I mean, we can have that debate now if you want.
Well, that's
Says
number 2 on
Policies
the,
and procedures, because it's on the agenda.
Yep.
Subcommittee scope. Perform annual review of selected sections of the subcommittee policy manual. B, develop recommendations for policy revisions, additions, or deletions as initiated by the subcommittee, recommended by the school committee or administration, or required by law. And then C, hear requests for full or partial suspension of selected policies and forward recommendations regarding such requests to the full school committee. So that's our public comment.
well, no, the request
Here
for
is
me was
intended-
the request for me was from the people like Jonathan, who are in fact somebody who has to deal with the policies day to day.
But we're also talking about from the public. Why would we worry about some requests from the public? As long as it's related to the policies of the school department.
That is a discussion that should happen at a full school committee meeting, when all the members have the ability to hear what the public has to say. I am not discrediting that, I think the public has some really good input, but I do believe that if there is something that the public is worth saying, it's worth saying to the whole committee. That we are in fact just going through the fine print of the policy and determining what to bring forward.
I think the other subcommittees also have some public input portion. I'm surprised that you are trying to define
The other
it so narrowly.
subcommittees have not met, quite honestly.
I know, they should have.
They
and,
should, I've asked them to.
They haven't.
So how are you saying that the other subcommittees have public comment periods?
I'm talking about the document that you wrote.
You just read to me and I saw nothing in there that said the word public.
Says here requests for the full policies. So what does this mean? Here requests of the full or partial suspension of selected policies. So where is the public not there? Is there something that excludes public?
To me, I hear that, again, Mr. Ford being one of the people, any of the principals who have to deal with these policies may have a request for the
That's-
suspension
Of
of.
course.
But that is what I'm hearing, that they would make that request of the subcommittee, not of the full committee, and that we would bring it forward. There's nothing, but like I said, I guess we are discussing the subcommittee scope, but
Yeah.
we'll have to agree to disagree and take that to the full committee.
So I think we only have one person who may want to speak, and maybe not after this. But why don't we do just one time allowance to.
How about we can take it out of order, go to the PE waiver and have them speak during that, and I'm fine with that for
Yeah, I'm
tonight.
fine with that.
Although I do say that if it is in fact a conversation that goes forward to the full committee, now, that I would suggest that they come to the full committee to speak, where everybody could benefit from what is being
But
said.
then with full committee, we limit the 3 minutes. I mean, the purpose of the subcommittee is to have a more intimate contact with the, people that are directly affected by this. And, of course, the superintendent and the principals and the teachers, they have their own concerns, they are stakeholders, but so are the public.
I am absolutely fine with the person who came tonight speaking and hearing that viewpoint. But I
Please
just,
take a seat up front. Oh, where are we doing that?
I wasn't planning
she can speak.
Okay, next item is PE waiver policy. Maybe the principal would like to do a brief introduction.
Well, we had talked about this briefly, that we were gonna table it.
We had discussed it, and I believe we had said that there are enough pieces of this puzzle that are already in place that it doesn't need to be incorporated as a policy, and or either directly or indirectly affecting the principal's decision at the high school.
Right, we have, plan on implementing an 8-period schedule next year, which would allow for the PE to fit in nicely up against their electives and the choice classes that they want. Right now, it competes with several other classes in a tight schedule, so we have implemented or plan to implement a schedule that we think will help alleviate the discord, I guess, maybe that's not the word, but the conflicts, thank you, the conflicts that happen. In addition to that, we also have in the program of study something called contract physical education, which allows students to offer up other proposals for ways of meeting PE credit. They just have to submit a proposal to me. It has to obviously meet certain standards, but that's also in the program of study. So that's one way that they can earn their PE credit if it does not fit in their schedule, or if they are medically excused for one reason or another and can't physically participate. We can do these other methods. So we, at that last meeting, thought that it was something we would table because we didn't
Pending
feel it.
the
Right.
8-period day and how that works out,
Exactly.
Okay.
yeah.
The reason I put these is last meeting we didn't identify the items in our agenda properly. So this is our way of curing that, whatever the mistake we made at the last meeting with the agenda. And thank you so much for recapping it.
Now, we've said we will, and then we say that we won't, and you have a person here
Yes,
who
that's
wanted
why
to
I'm-
weigh in on it. That's,
She's
Go ahead.
no, she's here to just observe too.
okay,
Yeah.
I just wanna give you the option.
I'm good, thank you.
Are you sure?
You don't want to be famous?
Only for volleyball.
Okay, so we are done with the PE waiver policy?
I'm sorry, what policy was that?
PE waiver.
Physical education.
In fact, it wasn't a policy discussion.
Right.
It was a discussion as to whether we should pursue. And at the time, the discussion came to the conclusion that we should not pursue at this time a PE waiver policy.
Okay. The item 4 is,
Can I ask you, have we decided on item 2, the subcommittee scope? I mean, you read what I had put, and I said
Oh,
those were,
okay, subcommittee
it is
scope.
each subcommittee's task to come up with a scope for their subcommittee. Do we
Okay, so
agree if these are the?
let's talk about that. I mean, I had some comments, but Jonathan, what do you think? Or Joyce, what do you think?
Well, I like this actual piece, because I believe something we need to do is go through the full policy manual on a periodic basis, which we don't currently do. And, I mean, in the past, I think I brought 95% of the policies forward that have been considered by the school committee over the last 5 years. And that's just me responding to changes in legislation or new legislation that direct us, or directly impact what we do. And I believe we need to go through section by section in an ongoing basis, maybe over a 4 or 5 year cycle, so that we know that every policy that we have on the books has been reviewed at least in the last 5
Yes.
years. I think that's exactly what we need to do. And also the second piece, develop recommendations for policy additions and deletions. I think that's exactly what this committee should be doing, is what we're doing right now, which is putting forth potential pieces that would then go to the full school committee for the process of either adoption or revision. And if you look at the third part, I don't even necessarily know that, or think that we need to do the third part here, request for full or partial suspensions of selected policies. I would argue that's actually the function of the full school committee. So,
But
so
still,
in looking
the
at what we're doing.
subcommittee, I mean, if cannot decide, we can't really decide anything
Right.
in here, it's just,
This is
they
a place,
develop the background information, why.
Well, and this, just so you know, this is just a number of schools that had descriptions of their subcommittees. I took their guidelines for their subcommittees and merged them into what was consistent, so that between the subcommittees, they would have kind of a consistent flow, and that they worked with what I felt people were saying a subcommittee was versus an ad hoc committee or a special
Right.
committee. But you're right, I mean, I get the point that a full or partial suspension of a selected policy, the policy's already been voted by the entire committee, and then you're dealing with the intricacies of that policy. It's not necessarily this group's task to pass that back on to the full committee, and it just puts a time delay in the process by bringing it to a subcommittee.
if you look at simply the first two components, I mean, that's a full-time job. I mean, we could hire somebody to do item A, perform the annual review of selected policies, given the fact we have hundreds of policies. And I think the other piece, the second piece, which is just make recommendations for either implementing, developing, or amending existing policy, that in and of itself is a huge task as well. I don't personally believe we need to move beyond those two components, but at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a, opinion one way or another for the item C, but I was going to add two more. One is because we don't have a policy manual to start with.
We
putting
do.
Well, we do.
One together.
We do have a policy manual.
but
It's just not complete.
Incomplete, yeah.
Yeah, but we have, I mean, we're
And
still
then,
guided by the policies that we have.
The other one is, I put it on the agenda, in town charter and code book, we have some policies and procedures that we'll be discussing later, so maybe again, at the beginning, it'll be good to review those and resolve that, either, get rid of all those things from the code book, which is really, some of them are really obsolete, or.
I'd be willing to take that one out of order and
Oh, you
kind
wanna
of
do
discuss
that?
it with this,
Yeah.
because quite honestly, I have to tell you, without having received any materials ahead of time, I don't know
I
what
I
you're
feel the
referring
same
to.
way.
Well, but you developed the agenda.
Yeah,
The
We
chairman of the
could
committee.
we could talk about that, actually, out of
so
order.
let's talk about that, so right now,
Great.
we are moving to, no, I got one for everybody.
You one for me?
Oh, you want one too?
So,
I think I have one next to one.
what was the first point that you added to the subcommittee scope? I didn't get that for the notes.
Oh, here it is, that's it. I'm sorry?
The first, after items 1 and 2, you added a point to the subcommittee scope, and I wasn't quite sure how you were wording that. You said you had 2 things to add, and one of them was,
One of them was, update, repeal certain town charter and town code articles. That's the item, 11.
would we
Wouldn't
have
that
that as a standing
Wouldn't that be-
operational?
That seems like that'd be a much bigger discussion, like a full school committee
Well,
discussion.
we still have to, I mean, the purpose of this subcommittee, I mean, if you wanna do it part of the school committee,
Does-
that's fine, but, this
Does-
committee can, look at the, so,
Does
yeah.
the school committee have the capacity to vote to repeal or update a component?
No,
make
just
a
to-
recommendation
send
for
forward
a
a
warrant article.
Yeah,
So,
But somebody has to go through the whole, charter and code book and identify what changes we need. And some of them has to be done by, the administration.
okay, so let's take this
So
out of
let's
order,
take,
that that's what we're doing. I thought you had one other thing before that you had mentioned.
Well, I wanted to do, one that says complete book, but, Jonathan says, we do have a book, which I haven't seen.
yeah, it's
Well, maybe
right now,
maybe we can just
in
change
all the schools.
A to be perform annual review of selected sections of school committee policy manual and complete,
Yeah, I mean, that covers that already, so
yeah.
that's, I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. So let's do the, item 11
Okay.
of our agenda. So one thing that we sort of talked about but never resolved is to, we develop and submit the budget by the 31st of December,
Mhm.
and selectmen, they don't really do anything until February or March. I think there is
They have to
When
have, they're submitted the third week in January, I thought.
yeah, but I mean, there is a period that we could benefit from.
No
And
doubt.
I think, we have enough case to make the other changes, so that may be easily achieved with the other changes. So I think that will be beneficial to administration, also beneficial to people, students and public, because they'll know more about the budget financial information. Now, the article 311.8.
Can I just go back to the top one for a second? You do
Yes.
realize that that submission to the submittal to the town government is in the Mass General Law for
Which one?
schools. It's chapter 70,
Are you talking about December 31st?
it is.
It's in the,
I can't, didn't bring my book, can't quote you
I
first.
asked that, they said it's only in our town charter.
I saw it, I read it in the book and I was
I'll
surprised by
check
it.
that one. Do you remember,
I don't remember the chapter.
okay, I'll check that. Now, the next one, 311.8, these are just examples I
Sure.
picked this afternoon, I had some free time. It says, the committee by 2/3 of the vote of the whole committee may dismiss a teacher on tenure for inefficiency, incapacity, unbecoming conduct, insubordination, etc. So we can't do that.
Ed
There's-
reform has overrides that, does it
Yeah.
not?
What is it?
Ed reform basically
Yeah.
Well,
overrides that.
and it also changes some good, well, there is a component to the reform, but it's just cause. And I believe it
Oh,
changes
that's
it,
not the committee.
and I
No.
believe it changed, well, ed reform changes the principle,
Mhm.
and they changed the threshold to just cause, which is a higher threshold,
Right.
Right.
yeah.
So, I mean, those are the things that
No,
we need
that's
to look at.
interesting, yeah.
And then number 14, when there are 5 or more pupils retarded in mental development in attendance upon its public schools, the school committee shall establish
Yeah.
special classes. Again, I mean, that's obsolete.
That's obsolete, yep.
Says 311.25, the regular meetings of the committee shall be held on first and third Tuesdays of each month.
Yeah.
And then number 34 gives the order of business. It says shall, so that means you have to do that, but we never do that. And number 36 is interesting. It was in our agendas all the time. I was saying, where did this come from? We couldn't find the,
Oh, yeah.
so it's in the town code.
Well, again, the argument that we've had with that piece is that it's
Which piece?
not well written. Well, the piece that appears at the bottom of our agendas, that
So that we need to improve upon. I
we need
agree.
to approve it, but it doesn't, it works if you understand that a hearing is not the ability to speak before the committee that day, because clearly it doesn't meet open meeting law threshold of 48
Right,
hours.
that's right.
But what we have interpreted it to be is that if we receive the request at least 24 hours between the date of a regular meeting, that they are subject to get a hearing as to whether they can appear at a future meeting.
Right.
So if you have I would guess, an open agenda item for that, which we don't, you could accommodate a letter from somebody 24 hours in advance to hear and it wouldn't involve them being there, it'd be for the committee to have the discussion as to whether they could appear at a future meeting for a hearing. But it also kind of goes to the topic of what a public hearing is, because they're bringing together a request for a hearing, which is very different than just to appear at a meeting, if you're going to.
Right, so we have a lesser version of the public comment. We let people speak for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's something that, we could talk among ourselves and then bring a proposal to the school committee.
Do you have any idea what you think that should be?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
No,
Okay, no, it's just, I
I mean,
thought you may
I
have.
was just identifying things, looking at it, saying, that's interesting.
Yeah,
And the number 39 is a member, so this is talking about a school committee, a member wishing to submit material for discussion or vote to a meeting will submit such material to the superintendent by noon on Monday, the day previous to the meeting, for inclusion on the agenda of that meeting. I mean, as you know, I
Yeah.
had problems getting things on the agenda, and it's still not clear whether it's the superintendent that makes the agenda,
I make the
or
agenda.
you make the agenda, but then you don't put my request on there. But beside that, this one says superintendent makes the agenda.
Well,
But it also
The
says the
super-
day before.
Well, this
Is that
yeah,
not
it says,
on time?
and it doesn't.
Yeah, day before you can't do it
Open meeting
anymore,
law.
that's the
Yeah,
open
this is,
meeting law.
this is obviously not
The
reflected.
superintendent and the chair both have input into the agenda. I approve the agenda
But
before
the
it goes
school
out.
committee members don't have input, or they just get,
Through the chair or the superintendent,
so the point of this discussion is,
yeah.
there is a lot we can do with
Yes.
this, or we can decide, again, we can't decide, but the school,
Right.
we can recommend to the school committee to delete this whole thing.
It
from
needs
the-
to be amended, right, from town charter if that's the case.
It's not in the, this is not in the charter,
code.
this is in the code part.
Okay. No,
So
agreed.
I think what they did is at one point they took, this was like a 1968, they took the school police policy manual and put it as a part of the code.
Probably.
And then a lot of things happened since then.
Well, ed reform and open meeting
Yeah.
laws being the two. But, I mean,
So
it's
the
interesting.
question is, do you think the subcommittee should be working on it, take the first crack on this, or the whole school committee should take the first crack on this?
My thought, because this is so different than typical policy, is to take it back to the full committee and say, if there's anybody who wants to work on it as a subcommittee separate from this, because I don't think it applies under the,
Okay.
you know,
School policy.
school policy, but I think it's worth pursuing as a
Yeah,
special, because it has a life. Once you've amended the code, you're not gonna go back to it every year. You're gonna hope it stays until a new ed reform or something comes along to change things.
So what we wanna do is I see this as a, warrant article for the next town election, so that means we gotta, time comes up quickly, so, we gotta form the task group.
But for the
And
next
then,
town, you mean which town? Not for this town meeting,
I'm talking about the next one,
the next year,
2015.
or special, should there be one.
Yeah, I don't think they will do this on a special one, but, so we got
Yeah.
like a 9 months to work on it, and time will fly
Oh,
quickly.
absolutely. Do you know who's on the town policy, charter and code committee?
Yeah, there was yeah,
Because I think we'd have to coordinate with them as well.
of course.
I think it's worth bringing this back to the committee, which I can have on Tuesday's meeting, because I can have that on the agenda tomorrow morning,
That's
to form a special committee to start that process, if that's
That's good.
agreeable.
That sounds good to me. So we're doing a committee or a task group?
I think you'd call it, I don't know what you'd call it, an ad hoc subcommittee, short duration of time, single purpose.
So we can let people decide on Tuesday. Okay. So so we covered so far number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 11. Those are done. Any more discussion on those before we move on?
I did want to say with respect to the agendas, could we do that through Mary Shea? Because she is the school committee secretary. That way, Dr. L, she could compile it, you can approve it, and then she'd go through the process of collecting all
I
the.
did this as a favor to her because my office is right next to the town hall, and this was a
Okay.
little,
I was gonna say, because the thing she can do, that we didn't do this time was
Collect all
collect all the
existing
materials and get them all
policies.
distributed on time so that
Yeah.
everybody had a chance to pre-read
that's
this.
a good idea.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. Number 4 is updating bullying policy in accordance with the Acts of 2013.
So this was a minor change to our existing bullying prevention intervention plan. And if you flip through to the end of the policy, we can actually accomplish the goals of implementing the requirements by actually just making some changes to our definitions. So if you look at the last 2 pages, you'll see in red the additional information we put into 2 different definitions, one of the aggressor and one of under bullying. And basically, we've simply expanded our definitions of what an aggressor is and what is covered by bullying to members of our school staff, including but not limited to an educator, administrator, school nurse, cafeteria worker, custodian, bus driver, athletic coach, advisor, or an extracurricular activity or paraprofessional. Advisor to an extracurricular activities or paraprofessional. So basically, we've just increased the scope of this bullying policy to be compliant with the new regulations. And it really is as simple as inserting that phrase into 2 specific areas. There was a third piece in the legislation that wouldn't apply directly to our policy, but applies to the law in general. That wasn't required to be incorporated. The other thing I also did, and under relationship to other laws, I went through and I looked at the non-discrimination clause. And I updated that. We had updated a number of policies about a year ago. I don't know if you remember, like the harassment policy and a number of other policies to reflect the new requirements. And this had slipped through the cracks, so I put in that language here as well. And also, at the very last paragraph, it says, in addition, nothing in this plan is designed or intended to limit the authority of the school or district to take disciplinary actions or other actions under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 71, Sections 37H, 37H and a half, and I added 37H and 3/4, which is the changes to student discipline that came out of Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012. So that way, we're in compliance with that additional piece as well, so we've kind of killed 3 birds with 1 stone here.
Can I ask, on the first 2 that includes the list of people, do we include volunteers? Volunteer coaches, volunteer?
Well, I would say advisors, extracurricular activities.
Okay, and I read that
would-
to be
would be
advisor,
an-
like an appointed teacher advisor.
No, I would imagine, I would imagine they're not a school employee. So I think this is targeted at school employees, because it specifically talks about school staff in the legislation. And then it
Yeah.
says, including but not limited to. So I would imagine if we had an issue with bullying and it took place with a volunteer, we wouldn't pursue any disciplinary action in-house aside from maybe telling that
Suspending
person
them
they're
from
not
the
welcome.
volunteer
But we would
activities,
simply
right?
turn it over to the police.
Okay,
And let the police follow through and do due diligence in determining whether in fact we have that kind of issue and
Okay.
take the appropriate action. I mean, one of the things we're very lucky here in Stoughton is the fact we have 3 SROs,
yes.
which is an incredible resource, particularly at the secondary level, to look into these kind of things and then follow up where we may
SROs are
lack the
school resource
authority.
officers?
Yes, police officers.
So we got 3 full-time or 3
Well,
part-time?
it's 2 full-time and 1 part-time, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow,
So Ms.
that's
Miller
great.
works at them in a much
You
expanded
got your own
capacity.
police officer.
Yes, they're excellent. They are a huge resource for us, and they do a lot of great work.
And we have the right people in the
Yeah.
roles, which is, I think, incredibly important in terms of having an effective school resource officer. I think we're very fortunate. But the advantage of having them also, though, is when something happens which does fall beyond the purview of the schools, because you can't discipline a volunteer. Or-
No,
There's
no.
there's nothing you
Other
can really do other than to say you're not.
removing them from their volunteer
Exactly.
activity, yeah.
But having that kind of resource to go to directly and have them deal with that kind of issue, I think we're in a very good position. So, and that piece wasn't included
Okay,
in the legislation.
okay, I just
So.
had to ask.
It's a very good question.
Otherwise, no, I think the language is fine with me.
Okay. So,
How do you feel about it, Dr. Earl?
I'm also at a disadvantage, I haven't looked at it. I mean, this is a small change,
Yeah.
but I must admit, I didn't read the law.
So the
I
choice-
should have
okay.
complete. I think we can just take it, because we're gonna have the first reading and a second reading anyway, so.
Well, that's the
I'll
question.
reserve my comments.
Are we
this
ready
isn't-
to move this forward to first reading, or do
I-
you need to read it further
this-
and bring it back to
this
another
isn't-
subcommittee?
I don't see,
this isn't a new policy, so
No.
this wouldn't go to a first reading. This
well,
would
we'll
just,
go to first reading?
if it's a new policy, there should be 3 readings.
Right.
An informational reading, a discussion, and then a third reading, potentially reading, or simply a vote to adopt in 3 consecutive meetings normally. But if we're simply revising a policy, we don't have to go through 3 readings of the new policy. we can simply vote to revise the existing policy with a single vote.
They can't, they can't
Why don't
table
we
it to
do
move
our
it
two
forward.
readings?
Well, we can't determine, if the board hears it, you know, Tuesday night and determines that they have enough information to make a decision and somebody moves to vote, they can vote, we can have a
Well, what we
vote.
can do is, we normally do, even for revisions, we do first reading, and then second reading and vote, right?
Well, we've never done that here in the past. In the past,
That's all I remember.
for new policies, we've done that every time, because it's generally a requirement unless it's an emergency policy, at which point the school committee can waive
But I don't
the 3
recall.
readings. But in the past, when we brought forth policy revisions, if it's been a revision of an existing policy, and it's something such as what we're seeing here, where we're simply amending language to adjust to a new law, and the language that we're putting in here, it's canned language anyway, that was a recommendation that this be the language we use. It's just generally one vote of the committee to change it. But at the same time, I mean, the committee can put it out and you can suspend it and a vote, or you can simply decide to take it home and read it and come back to it,
Table,
or
yeah.
you have the ability to go any way you want. But with a new policy, unless it's an emergency policy, I believe that's
an
when you would
emergency
need to vote.
policy?
What's that?
Is this an emergency policy?
It's not an emergency policy because the things that are in this policy, we would be doing anyway.
Right.
So this is simply adding a layer of common sense in writing
Mhm.
to an existing policy. And in fact, we would deal with the issues that this addresses the same way we deal with everything right now. This isn't actually changing anything for us.
Okay. If it's not emergency, then I would wait till the next meeting. Would that be okay?
To the next subcommittee meeting,
Yeah.
and that's, if that's fine with you, that's,
It's fine with me.
okay.
This is a compliance issue, so it's not gonna,
You're saying we are complying.
I'm saying
Because
that,
I thought the purpose of this meeting was to deal with the emergency stuff.
No, it's to
No.
deal with all the policies.
No, I mean, like the early meetings, said, so we do the review of the general policies, and then, state has several policy changes that the school committee needs to start acting on this month. That was January, so
Yeah.
do we have anything,
yeah, this is one of the things, because this is a requirement. So when we've had a number of things, it's like a lot
I
of
just asked
things.
you if it is an
It's not an
emergency.
emergency,
Well, nothing's gonna happen if we don't implement this tomorrow. I mean, the other thing also is the deadline could pass on this, and the policy, you know, the Department of Ed, the state isn't gonna fall out of the, you know, come out here and looked at for this policy. And in fact, we do everything this policy requires and more
Mhm.
already. When I initially asked for this subcommittee to meet and get things going, it's because we have things like this just waiting to be taken care of. And we just need to get them done. And then so we can move on to the work of going and looking at, you know, what don't we have in place, or what needs to be revised, or what policy we have in place from like 1968 that nobody's looked at in 40 years. I just want to get this going so that we can actually move on to important work and get a solid school committee policy manual that reflects all the things it needs to reflect.
Well, that one we'll start doing it,
Let's do it.
but this one, I mean, if you say it's emergency, that it has to be acted on at the next meeting, then I say let's do it. But if you are telling me that, you know, waiting for another month is not going to hurt anything, that you're already doing these, then I say let's wait to the next meeting.
This is as simple as taking language that was given us and putting us into a policy and taking it to the full committee.
Okay.
If this committee wants to wait,
the question is, when is this committee meeting again? Are we meeting on
I was thinking about like the next month.
okay, but I mean, that's what I mean,
No.
instead of, we're now 2 school committee meetings out, we're pushing it back till,
but the policy that I do believe we need to get in place right now is the hiring policy. And we need to have the hiring policy in place, because our hiring season starts potentially next month. Because if, for instance, for things such as non-renewals, they can happen as early as March. Because ultimately, the earlier you do it, the better job pool or candidate pool you have to draw upon in filling a position. And you also give people the opportunity to go out and find a job, as opposed to letting them know in June that potentially we're not gonna bring you back next year. So,
The hiring policy that is, I don't know if that's the
So-
one that you have circulated the draft, that,
I didn't circulate it to everyone, I just gave it to you, because I
So that-
thought we were gonna meet and discuss it.
can we finish
So-
up this
Yeah,
topic
let's-
first?
Yeah. But going back to this particular policy. This is an addition of language that was given to us to expand the scope of this policy. We currently already, our processes already reflect expanded language. So this is, I mean, people can read it, but there's not really that much to discuss regarding it. And the other additional piece that we put in place was under relations to other laws. We added non-discrimination language, which also was given to us, and we were required to update our non-discrimination policy along with our harassment policy. We've just updated this policy to reflect it. The other piece was including 37H and a half in this, or 37H and 3/4, which is a discipline policy that just came out. You know, which is another piece where it's not something that's necessarily open to discussion. It is what it is, and it needs to be included here. If it weren't included here in our next CPR, they would come through and tell us to include it. So, I mean, we can put it off and read it again, or we can simply take it to committee and move on to the next policy to look at, and not allocate any more time on something which isn't necessarily going to change if we read it now or we read it in a month.
Well, I mean, we have the subcommittee to look at these things, and I told you the changes are minor, but I told you what I haven't done. I haven't checked the part that's not seen here, which is the acts of 2003. So I haven't checked that. So if you don't want me to check it, if you wanna send it to the full committee, be my guest. I don't know why we are having a subcommittee here.
One of the reasons, when we were at the last subcommittee meeting, we discussed giving people the responsibility to do specific things. And when we were at the last meeting, I was given the responsibility of amending this policy so that we could bring it back and then take it to the full committee. Now what didn't happen there was we didn't say, well, we're all gonna go read Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012, all form an opinion on what this language should look like, and then come back and debate what the language would be. I was given the task of amending this policy and bringing it back to committee so we could then bring it forward. So if we're all going to read it and we're all going to do the language, and we need working groups to develop the language, and you know it's going to take us a lot longer. I mean, if we all have tasks, we all have skills, we all have, you know, we all have college degrees, we all have experience, we all have the capacity to put policies together to bring them back to the committee and look at minor language changes. I think that we can trust each other to bring forward a policy, in particular something incredibly simple like this amendment, and then have it go onto the committee so we can actually accomplish more work, as opposed to then going back and referencing each other's work to make sure, you know, do I agree with the language or do I don't agree with the language? You know, I think that if everybody went back and read the Acts, and in fact this isn't Chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012, which you just referenced. This is to change the bullying legislation. If we're all going to go do that on every policy and then come back and debate all the language, I don't think we're going to get a lot done. I think we have to have faith in each other's ability to do good work and make the decisions. And in particular for things which aren't going to be potentially politically contentious, or where people are going to have different opinions on what the language should be, to allocate that additional time, I don't see it as being an effective use of time.
Well, I mean, that's your opinion. I don't
It
think
is.
we appointed you as a subcommittee of one for the
No, but
single policy.
we did have
So
the
what you
discussion
do is,
on the individual policies last time and who would, and asking for
So
volunteers.
that's
to-
like a taking the first crack. And
Would you feel
the-
comfortable if we talked about, if we put this on the agenda and you have the ability between now and Tuesday to do the research?
I
So that
told
you can
I
bring.
told you this doesn't really, I don't have strong objections to this,
Okay.
but the principle of the issue, you know, we have a subcommittee, maybe, you know, we are just trying to learn, this is the first subcommittee ever, and then we are trying to learn to, you know, work, because in my profession, we have committees, subcommittees, and you just don't give one person the one task and then say, okay, that's it, we are just pushing it forward. You don't do that.
I disagree,
But,
but let me just go back, because I think when, in terms of a broader scope definition of what this committee is going to have to tackle, this is probably the low-hanging fruit. This is the stuff that is, you know,
Agreed.
boilerplate, template kind of amendments to articles or to policies. We are going to have policies that exist that we are going to substantially rewrite. Those are the ones that I think are going to take us a couple of meetings to work through. We're going to have brand new policies that are going to be required, that the state may have a template that we need to modify ours. Those are the ones I think that this committee is going to spend a great deal of time with. The ones where the state is saying, you need to amend this and here's your language, that we
But the
suggest.
state didn't say, this is the language, did they?
This is the language that we were given by the state. This
Okay,
isn't
maybe
something.
that's all I need to see, if that's the case. So you're saying these changes, you just made it verbatim as state recommended, not your interpretation of the.
Exactly, as we
Okay,
discussed.
then
in the last
I don't
meeting.
have a problem,
So, okay.
So we will put this on the agenda for Tuesday.
that's fine.
And if you
Okay,
do have things you find between now and Tuesday, they are part of the discussion
Sure,
for Tuesday as well.
okay.
Okay. Just keeping track of what we're putting on the agenda so I can tell Mary. And Dr. Earl, if you will, on the town charter ones, if you have this electronic,
Oh,
can
yes.
you email that, the electronic version, either tonight or first thing tomorrow, so that Mary
Okay.
can include it in the packet?
Okay,
Thanks. And you'll provide Mary the,
Sure. Before I leave tonight.
thank you.
I'm afraid to ask Joyce, are you keeping minutes?
I am,
You're so great.
yeah. I keep them, I'm not so good at typing them up, but I'm keeping them.
Okay, so any more discussion on item number 4, updating bullying policy?
You had given to us this last meeting, I don't know if that's helpful to the.
Yeah, this is one of the number of different things that came out regarding.
Yeah, so this is what we received last meeting about this bullying law, which covers the language of the law, so if you would like, if you don't have a copy of that, you could have that if you would like.
Thank you.
There it is.
Ooh, the teen dating violence, there was I don't know if you were able to pull the Department of Education guidance on this. This is the new law, and I was going to email it to you, but I forgot, I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
But can you recap what we discussed?
We discussed putting in a policy that ensures the fact that the principals have the resources in place to address this issue without putting in too many details to maybe handicap what the principal is doing. And we also, the other thing we talked about was instead of creating an additional discipline guidelines for the principals to utilize when addressing issues related to this policy, to have them utilize the same guidelines that are in the bullying policy. Because what we did is about 3 years ago, we had discipline guidelines for every infraction, different discipline guidelines.
Right.
For every infraction there was in the handbook, under the student discipline code. And what we did is we consolidated all the discipline into one part of the handbook, so that there was one consistent set of expectations across the broad gamut of issues covered by the discipline code. So one clear set of expectations for all students in a progressive manner based on what the offense was. When the bullying policy came out, it requires a 3-step approach to discipline, as opposed to what we had in our code. So we had to create an additional code outside of the unified code that we now use in all of our schools. What this policy we talked about is it kind of suggests that you should create a code that goes with it. But as opposed to doing that and creating a third set of behavioral guidelines, the discipline codes that would exist within the handbook, we just referenced back the approach that's used in the bullying policy, which we all believed, it seemed, based on the conversation, were appropriate to be used with this specific policy. So that basically what the policy is saying is the principals are required to have sufficient resources and training in place to deal with issues related to teen dating violence. And that when it does occur, they'll use the same methodology that you find in the bullying code to address the issues. And in teen dating violence bullying, they kind of go hand in hand. So, and what I did is then, 'cause this was another piece that I was charged with, was just to create a draft of what that policy might look like for discussion here in the committee. So, and it's really just a paragraph. But this policy can be manipulated any way the committee would like in order to accomplish this goal of stating that the fact is, the school committee at Stoughton Public Schools will not tolerate teen dating violence.
And remind me again, I know you probably said it up front, this is a new requirement, or this is one where you
But
found
this
that
is
there
a
was a
new
gap?
law. I found it in our logo.
Okay,
So, and this is actually so new that even MASC doesn't have.
and doesn't have, I looked today and I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I looked as well. And they don't have anything on it, and generally they're the first people out of the gate on any new law in terms of identifying an appropriate or a base school committee policy to start discussions in the various school districts.
I think this is pretty good. What I would like to do is send you that guidance that the Department of Education issued, and then we can revisit this at the next meeting.
Sure.
So we can send that actually out to everyone.
Yeah, so I'll send it to everyone.
Right.
Okay.
I always think with a policy like this, I always think we have to keep in mind that we don't want to put things in place that in the future could affect how we develop our programs, or might have some kind of impact on existing programs that are successful. So with that in mind, I'd love to come back and revisit this based on that advisory.
Good.
Excuse me.
Anything else on teen dating?
Nope.
Number 6, extended school day policy for secondary schools.
Yeah, so last meeting, I was tasked with trying to put together a policy that would give the secondary principals the authority to extend the school day for students who need it. So I drafted this as a starting point for that, obviously open to discussion, that would give the secondary principals that authority without limiting the principal's ability to develop that program that's appropriate for their schools.
Can you give us a background? Is there any legal requirements or the issues related to
I can,
labor?
I'll take that question. What ends up happening is the principal doesn't have the capacity to extend the academic school day. The principal has the capacity to make a student stay for detention, for other things, as a consequence for behavior in school. So the principal can, or the principal says he can say you have detention, or you have to come to Saturday school, or whatever these things might be. But in terms of the academic day, that really is determined by the school committee or by your collective bargaining language, whatever it might be. Now, the committee can vote to authorize the principal to extend the school day. So what we're looking to do here is give the principal, and I want to open that discussion to all principals from what we talked about last week, to identify kids that are falling behind academically and that aren't responsive to the supports that we're putting in place. And the place that all of our principals struggle with is we can identify kids that need help. We can identify kids through testing and assessments and everything else that aren't progressing with their peers. But we can't always get the kids to come in after school for help or whatever programs we have, because whatever the reason is, be it is something is that child's responsible for being home after school to look after a younger sibling, or the fact that just nobody's gonna require that student to come and participate in our program. So we can identify kids that need help, we can track their progress, we can provide targeted remediations, but we can't always get the kids or the parents to buy in and participate with us. And what this policy does is it allows the principal to identify, to go through a process, identify kids that need help, and say, we are gonna actually extend your school day by an hour or 2 hours, whatever it might be, so that you get the help you need to be successful academically, to graduate from high school and have the skills necessary to not just go out in the world and eke out a living, but meaningfully participate in the world around. And what we were talking about last week is authorizing the principals to do that, the secondary principals. And what would the specific circumstances be that then allows Ms. Miller to say, we're gonna extend your school day? And then what would the requirements be for the principal in implementing the program to ensure that it's not just something which is arbitrary in nature, that there are specific criteria in place, non-subjective criteria for the most part, to allow a student to come in, to allow a student to transition out. And then what kind of supports should we require, or would the school committee require the principal, if she were in fact to put in a program that extends the school day? And I think most obviously, it would be transportation. So if we have kids and we're gonna say, you have to stay until, your school day's not ending at 2:30, it's gonna end at 4:30. We would have to provide that student, or the principal would have to arrange for transportation for the student to get home, if they're missing that window to take their regular bus. So that would be like a detail which we would require the principal in order to have her put in an extended school day program. So, and we'd ask Ms. Miller to go back to, what might a rough draft on that look like for further discussion in
So
the
this would essentially to make the students stay after school, the ones that they needed.
For targeted instruction.
For targeted
For
instruction
targeted
with an
instruction.
educational plan, goals to be met in a finite time period.
So
Exactly.
who will do the targeted instruction?
We would provide educators for the content area.
certified
So
classroom
will
teacher.
be like a stipend? kind of
Exactly.
thing?
Yes.
And this goes right along with the fact that we've built in funding in this year's budget, and we actually increased it for next year's budget, to allow principals to target interventions for kids, identify kids. We have a good assessment system. We're going to have a great assessment system moving forward. So we really can determine in a very timely manner what kids are doing well, what kids are struggling, what kids are progressing with their peers. We can figure when a kid falls off a cliff when something happens at home. Like, a divorce, that will tell you kids' grades just they tank. We can easily find the kids that need help. And it might be something as simple as hooking up with a counselor from some time, or if it's not as something as simple as that, extending their school day and giving them an academic intervention, be it for an hour or 2 hours, whatever the need is. And this is really just empowering the principals to go ahead and address kids' needs if they have the data to support it, to figure out what works and then to implement that kind of structured intervention. And as we talked last week, I think in developing a policy, the policy we're looking for is not only something that authorizes the principal to extend the school day of a student, but it also has expectations with it in terms of what the principal looks at in order to do that, and what the principal then needs to ensure happens once that school day's been extended.
Because it's not just about extending the time, it's about providing them that targeted instruction during that time.
Yeah, because if you're going to extend somebody's school day, you have to know that what you're doing is worthwhile, incredibly high quality, and targeted to a specific need.
So why
Yeah.
don't we also do it for the elementaries?
I believe we should. Since we had our last committee meeting, we
So policy's already expanded, it
Well,
hasn't even been a
well,
policy.
we had this initial meeting, and one of the things that we've been putting in place at all of our elementary schools based on the January AIMSWO data is interventions. So target interventions based on kids' progression with their peers, based on mid-year AIMSWO assessment data that all of our elementary school students do. And one of the questions that I asked all the principals was, what percentage of kids that you extended the offer to accepted? It had varied in all of our schools, but it was the lowest 50% in one of our schools. Well, we're offering after-school direct services, incredibly small classrooms targeting your kids' needs, and people are saying no. It limits, for instance, with our principals, Ms. Miller is accountable for the performance in the high school, just like I'm accountable for the performance of the school district as a whole, just like the elementary school principals are accountable for all their different levels in terms of student growth performance. And you know what? We have a pretty solid teaching core. Elementary schools, middle school, high school, the teachers do their jobs. They do a pretty good, if not great job in the classroom. And in the end, some kids just need more help. And if Ms. Miller is going to be held accountable for performance and everybody else is, and it's there and it's targeted, I mean, I think we have to support them and give them all the tools that are necessary in order for them to do everything possible to allow all these kids to be successful. And just goes right back to that, and looping right back around, because I diverged for a second.
Yeah.
But like when I was talking to the elementary school principals, you know, the program's there, they can identify the kids that have needs, they can identify the specific kids, they can tell the parents how they're gonna help them, and yet people are saying no. And I do believe we should extend this to all of our principals, to give them all the capacity to look at a situation. And I think the hardest thing for us, given all the data that we currently have, is just, you know, allocating the funds for the transportation to make it happen. And that's in our budget for next year, at least at the west, the middle school and the high school. I'd have to pull out the books to see if it's everywhere, but
I think it is everywhere.
I think it is everywhere.
I know it was at the DAW.
And I can just add to that, at the high school, we've experienced ourselves where we had the opportunity to provide some after-school intensive MCAS prep and remediation. And you know, at the high school level, they have competency determination. They have to earn a certain score on the MCAS in order to earn a high school diploma. So there are high stakes to the MCAS. And we would offer these after-school programs to our students for MCAS prep and remediation specifically, and we would have an extremely low turnout in those cases as well. And that's for something as
Serious.
for a high school diploma. So we've experienced it at the high school as well.
Well, a couple of questions, going back to the elementaries. I would suspect, though, that you probably have better participation at the elementaries than you do at the high school, just because of parental involvement at that
Exactly.
age.
Yeah.
But the thing that you also see at the elementary
Yeah.
school, and I'll go to the high school, and I'll say all the parents that show up for parent-teacher conferences and are involved in everything, none of their kids struggle, because they have that low parent involvement. And if you look at the elementary school, we have less kids that this policy would apply to there, because there is much greater parent involvement. But when you look at the kids that are gonna need this the most in general, they're the kids that don't have that parental involvement. This kind of forces the issue. And I think it's worthwhile, you know, especially given the information that we have now. It's not, you know, it's not like it was 20 years ago, when you had a report card that came out 4 times a year and you did grades. I mean, we have great, timely, formative, and summative assessment data that's going on all the time. We have complete systems. We can gauge student growth as an individual, against their class, against their school, against the district. I mean, we can really target instruction, and we can really target remediation. So it's not a crapshoot anymore on what you're going after. You know what you need to do, and we can get it done. And I think we can have a tremendous impact on kids across our district. And I believe this policy is a huge step forward into really increasing our capacity to educate all kids effectively.
You've done this before,
Which,
extended day at Hull.
when I was a principal, this was actually one of the things that I asked for when I was rebuilding that high school.
Because my question that I'm going to that is that if this clearly isn't an MASC type of policy. Do we know of others who do it? Do you feel comfortable with this language? Should we be looking at other schools and maybe borrow from their language if?
When we there's not a lot of people that do this.
Yeah.
But when I initially did this, I took it, I mean, we went through the full gamut. I proposed a policy, and you know, we went through the whole gamut. I had lawyers look at everything else. And I think this should be a homegrown policy. I don't think we necessarily have to model off anyone. The legalities of this are, the high school principal or any other principal cannot extend the academic school day of a student. School committee can dictate what the academic day is. You can't dictate the teacher's contractual day,
Right.
but we can define what the academic day is. You can give that authority to the high school principal or any of the principals to do it. But I would never expect a carte blanche. You have the capacity to do it. I think we have to do it with expectations, in terms of there's a whole process, procedure, and requirements for doing it. There has to, so to get kids in, there has to be progress monitoring once they're in. When they meet a certain requirement, they're out. And I also think that there has to be an expectation of things like, in particular, transportation has to be in place.
Right.
So that no students, you know, the parents, we're not inconveniencing the parents, although this will inconvenience, I'm sure, a lot of parents. But in terms of things like transportation or our basic commitment to the needs of the kids. So, and what are those? And that, I think, comes back to the discussion for this committee and eventually in the full committee.
I have questions for the principal.
Mhm.
Typically,
That's why she's here.
you're not dealing with kids who are, I'm thinking of like athletic eligibility. These are probably kids who already fallen through that crack and aren't. So for them, athletics isn't a conflict,
Well,
or could be.
it could
Yeah.
be, but if they are a student identified for needing this help, likely they're becoming ineligible for their academics
Okay.
anyway, for their athletics
yeah.
anyways. And so they wouldn't be able to participate in their
Okay.
athletics or their extracurriculars
Okay.
until they brought their
Good,
grades
yeah.
up. So through this program, they might be able to return to
Yeah.
their season.
So
Well,
this is real for kids that are really doing poorly in school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this doesn't specify, this particular policy, the way it's drafted, doesn't specify what the criteria would be. We would have to develop that criteria, but I would imagine if I were given this authority, that I might start with our freshman class, and I might be looking at, students that have one or maybe two or more Fs, however I can feel we could manage it in the beginning, that they would be required to do this. And at progress report time or report card time, we might review those again and look for more kids. We have a lot of assessment data we can pull in addition to that, but I think, my,
You would also be limited by the capacity of your bus.
yes, but that's one thing that we would hope that,
How many buses do we have?
They would have more capacity than the elementary schools, because we'd have a shared bus between the middle school and the high school. So you'd probably be looking at least two,
I think we had 2 late buses at one time.
because you split the
Do
school.
we have any late buses now?
No.
No, it's a
We
problem.
lost late buses
And that's-
several years ago.
And that's where we struggled with a lot,
It's been
having
a
a lot
huge
of kids
loss to
stay
the
from.
district.
Yeah, it's tough. If I could say any one specific thing that we could use
Mhm.
to get a big bump in terms of student performance, it would definitely be the bus, because then kids can stay after school and get help. How many kids don't stay because they're not gonna have a ride home?
It brings up another question, but I'd like one other question for you is how do you enforce if a high school student has an after-school job?
Yeah, there were obviously our challenges.
Yeah.
We would expect the student would have to work around them. And we're not talking about working past,
Well, for you though, in the model that you just gave us, it wouldn't apply because all the kids would be 14.
Oh,
yeah, we're
right,
talking about
right,
freshmen. I mean,
right,
some of
right.
those freshmen
Right,
do have some sort of
Sure.
job, but we would be keeping them only an hour, maybe
Okay,
2 hours past
okay.
the school day, which
okay.
still allows them to do something in the evening.
And you would see very different programs from the different levels. And as a high school principal, that's in fact the policy I use for every 5 weeks. We, for report cards and progress reports, any student with more than 1 F, you can make 1 mistake, you get 1 F.
Right.
As soon as you had the second year with us for 5 weeks, 4 days a week, 2 hours.
That's like prison.
And, you know,
That could be a
but
motive.
it's a stick in the carrot, it's one of the things is, it reflects the fact that we are committed to the fact that you're gonna be successful
Yeah.
here in high school. And we are committed enough that we're gonna get a teacher, we're gonna have incredibly small class sizes, and we're gonna get you help every day.
Yeah.
And, and then the stick is, you're gonna lose some of your time to do what you wanna do and hang out with your friends and goof off or play sports or whatever it might be. But in the end, the first year we did it, we had about a third of our freshman class in this program,
Mhm.
so maybe 30 some odd kids. By the third year we were in place, we might have 5 or 6. And in that high school, and this was part of a bigger package, but we went from being around 230th in the state for MCAS performance to 75th in 3 years. And this was one of a number of things,
You're
but
talking about high school?
it was in high school. And
We were never that low.
no, this was in
And then help.
in
Oh, in a
Hull.
hall,
In
oh,
Hull.
okay.
And this was part of the whole commitment though, of a bigger package, but it was going after everything in 9th grade. It was targeting it
Yeah,
as soon as you get kids, because there is a huge difference in expectation between the high school and the middle school.
Mhm.
It's a
The most
completely
important
different
year,
world.
I would argue.
Yeah, and a lot of kids struggle that first year, a lot of kids fail classes that first year, a lot of kids get behind the 8 ball and they never get back into
Mhm.
the swing of things. And as soon as they fail to get enough credits to be promoted to sophomores, they're just going down that track to not graduate.
There's also a social piece to it.
There is, and as soon as you're trapped out of all your classes with your friends because you failed everything, because you didn't take it seriously, because you were still working on that mindset of the middle school where I can fail and still be promoted with my class.
And you can't participate in anything.
Yeah, and then you lose. So the sooner kids figure it out in 9th grade, the better. And this was, for us, we always felt this was a great welcome to the high school piece. After that first progress
Based on
report.
reality.
We told you we were going to do it. You didn't believe us. Well, here it is.
very big, it looks
Um,
like a prison, because it's
but-
really hard.
But you do it for the first year, and then kids come up with the
Yeah.
expectation. And you'll struggle with the first year, because parents will fight you on it, people will fight you on it, you can't tell me, X, Y, and Z, well, we can. And, but after you go through that breaking in process, and it will be a huge headache for you. It just becomes something that's always there, and it can have a tremendous impact on what you do. And, you know, the data that Ms. Miller might use would be very different than what an elementary school might use. Because in the elementary school, we do have Ames Web, you know, that all kids take at all grade levels periodically. And we have a defined system of progress monitoring. So we can go back into the Ames Web every 2 weeks to track a kid in ELA or NAP, which isn't a tool that Ms. Miller has, but she also has content area specialists, which, you know, that are very focused and can give her great data, and she would just have to go out a little bit differently than say, you know, the DAW or the Hanson.
Now, I have a question. So this is the mandatory part for the kids that are doing poorly, and maybe more geared towards passing the MCAS to get a high school diploma. If we were to expand this to optional to the kids who want to get better scores at SATs, do you think that would be too many kids?
I think it's a different program.
It is.
Program, yeah.
And I'll,
It's
But
still
you-
extending the school day.
something-
I'll tell you what though, if you offer that after-school piece for kids for studying for the
Everyone will
SAT, they will come to that program.
Yeah.
It's just like we just, and I don't know if it.
So why don't we do that?
We've actually
Because
been
it has-
working on that.
Because it has a cost,
Yeah.
I know, but
Yeah.
this has cost too.
yeah.
Well, but two different programs, one will pull and fill, you won't have to do anything, you just need to offer it and it will fill up. But that program's targeting a different kind of kid.
Mhm.
And this is for a student that may not be as academically inclined or, you know, maybe somewhat disaffected with the school system or whatever it might be. And
These are the
this
kids
is,
we have to catch.
I
Not
know,
that we
but this
don't,
is-
it's not that we
this
don't
is
want to
really
catch
great,
the others, no,
But
yeah.
we are
Yeah.
trying to
Can I
improve
get-
the
Yeah.
educational opportunities
Yeah.
for everybody.
so the same time when I was meeting with the elementary school principals and talking about the number of kids, the relative number of kids that they had in their intervention programs. Later in the week, I went and talked to Janice Sullivan about some of the enrichment programs that we're putting in the elementary schools. Where we're doing cars first, a series of little race cars, kids getting built in cars and racing cars.
Markets.
Yeah. And then we're doing rockets, yeah. But you know, we sent home the flyers for that, and we're filled. We have a waiting list in
Sure.
all of our schools within a day. And you know, it's targeting both ends. In one end, if one type of approach, it's going to take care of itself, which is the enrichment piece. But when it goes to the other end, which is the tough end, where the real work needs to be done, you know, if
Top
you-
and average
yeah,
emphasis. And from also what you're saying, it sounds like more kids. So it's the majority of the kids.
Well, you know, for instance, with the enrichment program, we're gonna have to look at it, because with the enrollment that we have, you know, do we cap enrollment, or do we look at expanding it in next year's budget? I mean, obviously, we have constraints, because we have a budget on the books, but is that something in our next budget cycle that we look and saying, you know, we've had a tremendously positive experience here, you know, is this something we should maybe double down on funding, whatever it might be? You know, having buses also next year, we can have that coincide and complement the enrichment program as well.
Well, and if I can interject, when you mentioned that we're gonna have late buses, and we're talking about capacity for the program to match the buses, or buses to match the program, do we open the buses to athletics as well? I mean, that's the other thing, because that's traditionally what the late bus had been for as well.
Yeah.
And are now we budgeting realistically for
buses.
bodies?
Well, one of the, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
Logistics is
but I
fine.
think if it came down to it, I mean, we may have to establish priorities for that
Yeah.
bus, where boarding for the bus, you know, would be, a student that's coming from an academic program would have like a priority pass or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. Or maybe we need more buses, but,
Yeah, I just want to throw that out there
I mean,
as
generally
a
the-
sideline to this. I mean, that's for the full school committee, I think, to talk about, but,
at the high school though, well, I mean, a lot of kids have cars.
yeah.
I mean, it's
But
not
your
as,
freshmen and
Or
sophomores,
don't.
yeah,
yeah, they're the ones who rely on
Mine
somebody.
Yeah.
so we need to get this policy.
Older
piece in
kids.
place. Yeah.
I did have one more, and I can't recall what the question was now. Oh, so this is secondary, so this also includes the middle school, which I think will be a great feeder into catching those ninth graders as well as if the habits developed for these kids to understand that that's part of their day. So this is a policy, deadline, that was my next question. When do you have to have this in place?
For
We-
next year.
Well, we should have,
So for the handbook this coming year.
yes, but there's the second piece of this, though, is, well, first, I'd like to know if people would support striking the secondary piece of this policy, just having it be,
Does the wording fit the entire school?
you know, all we would have to do is strike secondary, and it would just read, hereby issues authority to administrative principals
Just having general does not
Yeah.
mean that you have to do it in
Right.
elementary.
Yeah, and it's, you know,
Well,
I
if
would
you wanna
imagine.
make sure the criteria in terms of how you identify and test and stuff is the same at the elementary
Well,
as it is.
The general criteria, I don't think will be a problem.
Okay.
Basically, we just need to say that you have to have basically a non-subjective set of criteria, so based
Okay.
on assessment data, performance data, whatever it might be. It's not just somebody, oh, he needs to go in the academic program. You know, it has to be, well, here's the data that supports it. And it would be very easy to find at all the different levels, and they're all different in terms of how they track student progress. But with this, the second piece would be actually putting together what the program's gonna look like and establishing the criteria. So that goes in the handbook.
Right.
We wouldn't necessarily have to put this policy in the
Okay.
handbook, but there would have to be a program in the handbook that could then reference this policy. Then that's what people would need to see, so that there's a clear expectation. You can't, what Ms. Miller can't do is just all of a sudden out of the blue send home, you know, a notice to a parent that we're extending your child's school day.
Right.
That's not fair. But what Ms. Miller would have to do is have this policy in hand, take it to her school council, talk to her school council about it, so that people start becoming aware. She would have to then develop a program with a specific set of criteria that applies to her school, and she would need to send that home. And I'm gonna argue you would need to send it home 2, 3, 4, 5 times and talk about it every
Sure.
chance you get. So that nobody's blindsided when that first notice goes home. Letting it to a parent saying, you know, your child has met such and such criteria, as such, we're sending the school day, they'll be receiving targeted instruction. You know, this is not something, because this is a big ticket item, in particular for parents in the high school whose kids go home and watch younger kids.
Right.
Because parents are gonna have to figure that out. You know, and I will also tell you, that is a giant motivator for a parent to get involved with the student academically,
Yeah.
when that kind of complication is
Sure.
coming to their world. And, you know, it was amazing the parents, I will tell you, based on experience, that became your ally when
Sure.
you're potentially losing that coverage for younger kids.
Sure.
You know, what can I do to work with them in this area? You know, I never had that conversation before kids were potentially getting their school day extended. And it was a great conversation we had. And it's also an area for Ms. Miller to talk about how, you know, this may seem punitive, but this really is an extension of my commitment to you and your child, to ensure the fact that your child gets a good education and can potentially be
Yeah.
more successful later in life. And people will appreciate that fact, maybe not initially, but in the long run. Because it's really what
This
it is.
just gives the authority to do it, but you know, if somebody doesn't do it, what would be the
It's
repercussion
the same thing
for
as skipping
that?
school.
It would be addressing the discipline policy
Yep.
probably, right?
51A, failure to send, discipline, whatever it might be, the principal would then decide how it falls in line with the handbook.
Would you have the ability to call it a tardy or an absence?
Well, if they weren't there, it would be
Be
an
an absence, yeah.
absence, yeah.
But absence is like,
But
it could be excused absence, so it's
Well,
okay.
if a parent
The
has a
parents say,
doctor's
"I
appointment,
excuse them."
parent has a doctor's appointment on a given day, and they bring in a note, you know, it's,
The
it
same
is,
school
yeah.
day.
Yeah.
This isn't one of those things where, you know, like the principal's out to get them. It's
Yeah.
just the same rules
We want to
apply.
work with you, right.
It's just, you know what, it's free, targeted instruction.
Well, I'm okay with striking secondary. I would like to know, I mean, clearly you had Ms. Miller's input. I don't know if you have Mr. Colantonio's. Is this something that the elementary principals, you would want to bounce off of them, or?
Well, the difference between elementary and high school in this, you know, likely will be, I would imagine they're gonna do very specific targets, whereas Ms. Miller's is
Right.
not gonna be able to target as well.
Right.
And I believe the elementary school principals would be able to go through and get most kids on board, without having to resort to this, just if they had the capacity to go here.
Sure.
And the other thing with an elementary school principal versus a high school principal, I can't imagine at the elementary level there wouldn't be a full individual documented plan. You know, that would be a project, something like BBST before you did this, as opposed to a bigger program type piece. So I mean, but one of the reasons why we want to get this done is to get them all, if they want to incorporate in their handbooks, which they would have to
Right.
do, in order to exercise this option, we need to give them time to do a plan proposal, to tell people what it's look like, what the criteria are, how the whole thing would shake out. And that would actually be a very interesting piece of what this is gonna look like. And it would give everybody in the school committee an idea or a good idea of how things are happening, and a better understanding of how the individual schools or levels are going after this issue. The thing that would happen also in elementary is although we have 5 elementary schools, they share a common handbook, they would have to generate a common policy then for implementing this.
Right.
So,
I think it's a good idea to, circulate it through the principals, all the principals. See,
Yeah.
maybe elementary school principals will say, we don't need this, or they'll say, we would like to be a part of that.
well, the thing about an elementary school principal is although the procedure for doing it, or the program information we get, they don't have to exercise it. So it would be an option for them.
Right.
Oh, I perceive it as being an option for them they can utilize.
But
Right,
this is an option for, even
Yeah,
for the,
right,
Yeah, we're not, this isn't a mandate from the school
just
committee.
Right.
enabling them.
it's just right,
Exactly.
okay.
It's the beauty of a policy
But,
like this.
It's still be useful to, good to have the input.
So we're gonna strike secondary, agreed?
Mhm.
Okay, you're gonna take it back to the leadership team meeting
We
or
can,
circulate it some
We
method?
can add it to the next
Yeah,
agenda.
we have one coming up, I think.
Yeah, I think it's next Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday.
Do we need to have this reviewed by legal counsel?
I already talked to legal counsel.
Okay.
What did she say?
Alrighty.
She said exactly what I thought she was gonna say. It was the same conversation I had 10 years ago when I did this in Hull. So, nothing's changed. No case law has come out since then that's changed Ginny Tate's understanding of this.
Yep.
So provided we follow this route, this is exactly how this should take place. So we can add it to the next leadership team agenda.
Okay,
Did you wanna, we'll get all the principals together, we'll actually get hold of you, we can talk about the language afterwards, we'll put maybe the last item. So then, in bringing it back, does everybody feel with Ms. Miller, work with the principals to draft what this would look like? And then we can get a copy circulated before the next meeting,
Yes.
and potentially we can hash out all the details at
Yep.
our next regular meeting to get it on the agenda for school committee to look at.
yes, I think that's, and that's, would put us about a
Yeah.
month out, and I think that's,
Well, it's gonna take 6 weeks in school committee,
right,
this is gonna be,
Right.
this is gonna
three
be.
reading, yeah.
Yep. So informative.
Yep.
Discussion, and then potentially the vote.
So I'll send this to Mary to be included on the leadership team agenda for next week.
Now, your handbooks are due when? In June or July?
We can be a little flexible on the deadline,
Because right now, what we're
It's
looking
about-
at is,
last, end of June usually.
we're looking at probably early May to have this to you right now.
Mhm. But if this is the only thing that we're waiting for,
Mhm.
we can have everything else.
You can have it all done and just be waiting on the vote.
Would you also get solicit opinion on how we enforce it? What would be the repercussions from the middle school, elementary school?
Mhm.
Because that will also be, have to be included in the,
Well, the thing about these, when it's the extended school day, it's all of our existing policies. So, the nice thing about it is we don't necessarily have to say we're gonna do all these things if you don't follow through. We just say, it's everything that applies during the regular school day. So if a student's not there, you cut a class. So because you cut a class, there's a repercussion.
Mhm.
It's really actually simple.
I quite honestly see it being harder at the elementary though, because like you talked about athletic eligibility here,
Mhm.
these kids are probably already excluded from that. At the elementary, you don't have that, but you have karate and dance, and you have all the after-school things that parents are probably gonna,
Well,
I think they may know things that we don't know, so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt to ask.
Well, one of the other things with this is, once a policy goes in, I would imagine you'd be going through all your school councils as well.
yeah.
So this would be something where we can elicit feedback from
True.
stakeholders at all the levels. And I'm a big fan of getting the school councils as involved as
On board,
possible. It's a great mechanism for something like this. In particular, in support of a principal bringing in a new program that,
This is something actually my school council talked about last year when we were starting to draft or drafting our school improvement plan for this year. We talked about the need for this and what it might look like, and the conversation circled around running the pilot program for the Chapter 222 acts that came out as well. So we've been talking about this a lot, and I think we'll start talking about it again now, but I feel that they'll agree that it's important, and there's definitely a need, and only benefits the community and the school and the students, not.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anything else on number 6? No.
No, I have a full page of notes, thank you.
Number 7,
It's longer than the
policy
policy.
on student attendance.
That was yours.
That was my assignment. I was looking, I remembered you gave me a homework, and I was looking for that paper. I got so many papers, I couldn't find it.
Okay.
Best if you send me electronically, then I can always search for it, or I'd like a copy. That makes it easy.
So 7 we're tabling?
Yeah. Would you email me
Sure.
the paper you gave me? Policy on student discipline, was that my,
So,
that was mine too?
no, it wasn't. So interestingly enough, we, this was actually something that we really needed to get done. This is one of the other big ticket items that we're talking about. We had wanted to go through and refine our discipline code based on chapter 222 of the Acts of 2012. But interestingly enough, after our last meeting, we had delegated that piece to Ms. Miller and to Mr. Colantoni to bring a draft forward on what it might look like. But the week after we met, the Department of Ed actually sent out an advisory, and they're going to interpret it for us. So I would request that we suspend discussion of this policy until the draft policy that was put out by the Department of Ed has gone through the public comment period and is adopted by the Board of Education. At which point we can go back, look at it. If we foresee that there are any gaps in the legislation that they put out that reflects this particular act and what we had hoped to accomplish, we can just bring it back to the table and talk about what it might look like. But until that's actually, goes through public comment and a final version is voted up, we can't pursue this particular policy. Because we don't know, we don't know what the state's gonna say.
So you said they did an advisory?
Yeah, they'd sent out a draft advisory on this particular piece. And it's out of public comment. Now, the day it came in, I gave a copy to Ms. Miller and said, stop your work until this runs its course.
Advisory is the just stop your work kind of thing, or is it the
Well, it's
draft of
it's a draft.
model policy?
It's a draft of how it's gonna be a regulation, a CRM, that comes from the Department of Ed that governs how we do discipline. And that particular piece came out probably 2 or 3 days after our last meeting. And so Ms. Miller got a copy, I gave a copy to Mr. Colantonio. We're gonna discuss it at one of our leadership meetings. But until it actually comes out, it would be pointless for us to actually pursue our own policy. The interesting thing is gonna be to see how it changes based on the comment period. And when it's done, it looks like it addresses virtually everything that we want addressed, either directly or indirectly in the language. If it doesn't change significantly, I don't think we need to do anything with this particular piece. But once the final language is there, and if there are gaps in what their language is and what we'd hoped to accomplish, or what we felt like we needed to define, we can just come right back, put that in front of us, and figure out what we need to add in terms of an in-house policy to have a complete set of expectations in terms of student discipline.
Do you remember when is the draft period will be over?
I think it was a 2 or 3 month draft period on that one. Yeah, they need to get that in place because there are deadlines from the legislation that are going to be kicking in soon. So, yeah. So they need to have something on the books for us to take a look at before that.
Okay.
Can I just take a 1 minute break?
Sure.
Too much coffee. Okay, we are taking number 10 out of order. This is what I actually passed out at the school committee meeting a few months back. What I have done is looked at the Massachusetts MASC general policy and did the section by section and just counted how many pages they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is, like I do homework for the next meeting, maybe we can take section A and B. And some sections will need to be done by the administration. Some section may be diagonal.
I
Align these to this. Are you talking about staff or are you talking about us?
Talking about stuff.
Because I don't think you have staff that
don't know if
can
we have the staff
handle
to
it.
do it right now. I mean, we do
What
run
about,
fairly light.
you guys have student volunteers?
I wouldn't trust a student volunteer to work on a school committee policy manual.
Scanning is one thing, but
It's-
aligning it to the,
No, you know,
Yeah.
we have senior citizens that volunteer at times, but I don't,
Yeah,
I
that's
think we-
like
I think we-
technology, they wouldn't be very good at it.
I think this
oh, you'd be surprised. I hired GIS technicians for the senior program,
depends on who you get.
yeah,
It's like anything else, it's like anything else. It just depends on the skills of the person walking through the
yeah.
door. I mean, potentially, would we wanna hire a paraprofessional, train a paraprofessional and have them do this task?
I mean, I think policy, long-term, or even short-term, you're looking at some tasks here that are probably unreasonable to expect any of us to do outside of our normal daily lives and jobs, and get it done effectively.
Now, the scanning part is pretty easy, they'll just put it
No,
on
I'm
the
talking about the
machine.
aligning the,
But the scanning part isn't the issue, it's having the person go through and identify what policy that they
here is
scan,
equal to here.
what does it align to over here?
I think even somebody spend a couple hours and generate a table of contents, that would give us a
Yeah,
good tool to start with, at least we know what we have.
but again, I think you're talking about being able to hire a paraprofessional to do it.
Table of contents is not that hard, anybody can do it.
Well, there's a name in all the policy, but
Yeah.
does the name give
But like
the
you said,
person
it's a
li-
couple of hours, and really, you're probably talking, not a couple being 4 hours, you're probably talking a couple of days in terms of somebody getting familiar enough.
Well, what I would do, if I were doing it, I would just copy and
Yeah,
paste.
yeah,
Well, we
Just
have,
go page by page,
Yeah.
copy and paste.
that's still several hundred pages.
Yeah.
we have some people that we pull in to work in some of our offices sometimes that are very highly skilled. I'm just thinking of some people offhand that could easily do this.
I know that you have people sometimes who come in and sub when you have people out, is
Yep.
that what you're talking, yeah,
And, we have some very skilled people.
Yeah. Some of them are retired secretaries in the school
You know,
system.
some are retired teachers, and
Yeah.
some are just people that are just retired that are spectacular.
They're
Do anything.
volunteers or,
No,
No, they're people we hire, that, to replace our secretaries when they're out, or people in different capacities when they're out. And, I'm sure I could get somebody to do this, it would just be a question of checking availability and.
but I think there's a lot here, I mean, there's one thing to do this, I've got the ability to read through the webpage, at my lunchtime from the MASC and do whatever. I don't have the ability to do large amount of printing at my office nor at my home, which I'm, seldom at. I think it'd be great if we had, as we're talking about looking at these 17 pages, had somebody who had the ability to go into, because that MASC doesn't supply you the PDF without buying it. You can go into each one and
Right.
PDF it, so we
you
have to
gotta
look.
look at it page by page.
You have to look at it page by page, so again, you're talking about perhaps that paraprofessional and doing that, creating that PDF record on a hard drive from the MASC one and aligning it so that we then all have copies of it electronically.
Or we could,
Or print it, they
paying
can
would
print
be
it.
easier, because I think they said $500.
I haven't checked.
I asked them, I was gullible,
We
so
have-
I
we have
asked them
access
to
to
send me
the
the PDF version.
Because
I have to
Not a
pay.
PDF version you have to pay for, you have access to the
You can cut
online
and paste the
tool,
whole thing.
but page by page.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but now
I
you're
do it.
talking hours of,
Yeah, no, I started it takes a long
Yeah.
time.
so maybe we're better off paying the $500 for
Yeah,
a
I
PDF
don't,
version.
I mean, don't
I
quote me
will,
on that,
I'll
but,
call them tomorrow.
The thing about buying the PDF versions though is we're probably gonna change them all. So would we wanna get a cut and paste version, just have somebody cut and paste out of it? And then so we have something that's amendable.
But the cut and paste would be it only comes as a PDF if you cut and paste. Oh, you're talking about cutting and pasting it in?
yeah,
If you
can
get a
do
PDF
from
version, you
PDF.
can run it through OCR on the software.
Yeah,
Mary's
I'm
got
sure their
Adobe Pro.
PDF version is,
Yeah,
Amendable.
yeah.
yeah. But I'll find out what the cost is.
Yeah, if it's 500, I would definitely pay,
Yeah.
because it's gonna cost a lot more to do that. If it's 5,000, it wouldn't be
Yeah.
worth it.
And I'll ask if they have it in Word.
So
Yeah.
500 divided by 4, well, we got Joe too, divide by
Yeah.
500 bucks a pop.
There you go.
It's just time. You know what, it's
Yeah.
just time. And I mean, for us, in particular with everything that's going on right now, between educator evaluation, we need
Town meeting.
the new frameworks,
Yeah.
retail, race to the top. I mean,
Feasibility. committee.
I mean, it's just time. Money's not the issue, it's just time.
But I do agree that I think it would be worth having somebody, and somebody consistent. I mean, it's one thing to say you can have somebody who's in, one day doing some
I
scanning
think I have the
or
perfect
whatever.
person to do this.
But
I do.
I think it'd be really helpful
No,
for.
Maggie is too busy.
Yeah, it'd be really helpful for the school committee to get kind of a sense of what we think it would take, time and money-wise, because it is going to be a cost out of the school committee budget, and well worth it, but I still think it'd be worth presenting to them.
You know, what happens with this is, once it's up and running, and say that we've gone through and we've looked at all the model policies and we have it in place and it's online, it's easily accessible, it's a much different mission for us to go through and do a review process.
Absolutely.
And allocate out, read 5 policies for the next meeting, and then we'll determine what goes to school committee for discussion. Then, right now, which is basically a rewrite of everything and trying to find an alignment between existing policies in our manual and existing models and under a different nomenclature in another manual. So it's a big task up front, but once it's done, it's a very,
Yeah, it's worthwhile.
it's a very manageable undertaking.
I still think it makes sense for us to read, like, section 8, the 17 policies for the following meeting. Is it worth discussing this at the school committee meeting in terms of the costs? I mean, I'll have a price from MASC by tomorrow. Or do we want to put it on the agenda so we can talk about, or should we just leave that for the subcommittee to deal with? Because at some point, if there's a
It's
cost associated with, to the school
Uh,
committee.
We'd like the MASC dues, we
Yeah.
have $5,000 allocated, and every year, school committee votes to approve that, but this year superintendent just went ahead and paid for it. So she has some money that she could use, so maybe you wanna ask the superintendent if she feels comfortable enough, depending on how much it is, $500?
Yeah,
I'm
but
sure
I'm
she-
talking more about the paraprofessional, about involving somebody else
Yeah,
and
maybe it's worth it.
to bring it to the school committee.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, the other thing is, I think we have the right person, and that's half of anything.
Yeah.
Knowing that you have a person with a particular capacity, that won't only do the job, but will do the job well, and that you can continue to go back from time and time and time again, that would then be familiar with the policy manual, the expectations, the process. And having that person available when other things come up, or if there are bigger ticket items we need to do, I think would be invaluable.
Can you take a crack at a real round number, so that when we're discussing this Tuesday, in terms of what we might cost us in a prepare, or not really?
I would need a lot more time to
Okay,
think about it.
then we'll have the general discussion without that.
If I were to give you a number now, it would invariably be probably half of what it really should be.
Okay, then we can
So-
say your number times 2.
Mhm.
But we'll put it for discussion for Tuesday, but with,
So, Dr. Yeo, can I ask you a question? What you did, number of pages? Is this the number of policies? Or is this actually going, looking
I
at every
wrote,
policy?
this I did a while ago, so I think what I did was, if
You
I
open every
remember
policy
correctly,
and-
open and see how many pages
Okay.
they are, and then add them together. So it's really not that much.
Well, it's a few hundred.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that much, except that 2 or 3 of the pages may be meaty enough that they are worth, 20 pages of things that are,
You know,
I don't know, I mean, some
Well,
of
you-
them are really,
the thing about these is every one of them is gonna have to be discussed. And every one of them is, I mean, some you may wanna bring in, some you may not.
yeah.
I would argue virtually all these policies, that are significant, we need to have a language model based on the needs of this community, as opposed to the general format they come from MASC, but this is a big undertaking.
I think maybe we'll get a feel for what it is when we look at those first 17 pages.
Yeah.
So the assignment's to look at them, not to, digest them totally. Get a scope, get a sense of scope.
do you think, I mean, if it's only 17 pages, we can ask Mary to send us,
To print them.
yeah.
We have to
Do
buy it.
you,
Well, it was those let's find out, I'll find out tomorrow how much it costs, because if it's,
It's
$500
only $500
and whatever, I'll process that on Monday and get that rolling and we can have them. If it is in fact something that we have to discuss at the meeting, I can see if she can pull. I could probably do that over the weekend anyway, it wouldn't be in the packet, but she wouldn't give them the packet for tomorrow, given what else we're giving her, but it could always be emailed. Okay. So we'll put it on for discussion in a general sense.
okay. Okay, now the next one is, any other discussion on number 10?
Yeah.
Number 9. hiring policy. So Jonathan has drafted something and we couldn't get together, but I was expressed that I was against it at the last meeting. And I read his draft. I got one.
Yeah.
Did you change anything?
No.
So I think this is, and then he gave me other things. One is the high school principal search process and hiring process for secondary teachers. So I looked at these two. I don't know how we should discuss this. The we started this. Our main role is, like organize our policies as stated in there, and then we are doing emergency nature things because, as I said, Joyce asked that we are in the process of reviewing entire policy handbook. The state has several policy changes that the school committee needs to start acting this month. So that's why we are handling these one-offs.
Yep.
So you expressed today that there are some emergency natures to the hiring policy.
I believe this is potentially the most important thing we're going to talk about. And one of my concerns with this policy when things come up is when we're in school committee, I think it appears sometimes as if the school committee doesn't hire based on a given set of principles. We have incredibly well-defined hiring policies and practices for professional staff, for faculty, for principals. We follow the recommendations of the Department of Education and in their advisory on hiring when we hire everyone else. And I have a huge concern that when the integrity of the process we use to hire people is continually questioned, that it undermines the credibility of the school department in an area, in fact, I believe is one of our strengths. Because hiring is potentially the most important thing that we do. Because we're hiring people that we're entrusting with educating children. And there's no greater impact a principal can have on a school than hiring either great people or hiring people that aren't great. And because the thing about public education is when you hire somebody, after 2 years, you have them for a career. So I'm going to argue that Ms. Miller is the most important thing that she does, and her legacy for the next 30 years will be the people she hires this year. And so when we're in school committee and it comes up that we're not following procedure, we're not doing what we're supposed to do, or the committee's not as involved as it should be in this process, I'd like to go ahead and address that issue. And that's why I drafted this policy. I know we had met after the last meeting because I wanted to show you the process that we use when we hire principals, which is well articulated. The process that we use when we hire secondary teachers, when we hire elementary teachers, because it's a full process, it's a multi-page process, it's multi-step. It takes the guesswork out, it focuses the attention where it needs to be, and it's something that we do consistently for every one of our hires. And in fact, if you go to the district review, one of the accolades was an excellent hiring process. And I want that process to hold true so it's unquestionable throughout our school district. Because there isn't, like I said before, anything more important that we do than hire great people. We are only successful as a talent that we have in this school district. So what I did, and I built this based on our conversation, because I know that you like the state law, and you'd also express concerns that the advisory was old. I'm going to say the state law is older than the advisory. But I think this is a good blend of the state law and the advisory. I think this reflects a great process that reflects all your concerns. It clearly defines the roles and responsibilities of everyone. It gives the school committee the capacity to say that we want to be involved in any given process, or if the school committee hire. It gives them the ability to review the process the school department is going to utilize when hiring any employee that is subject to school committee approval. It's just a clear set of expectations that the school committee can hand to the superintendent of schools in terms of how the hiring of people that fall under the school committee for appointment takes place. And I believe it's a good blend of the state law. In fact, it is the state law with a mix-in of expectations from the Department of Ed Advisory. And I believe this meets the needs that you've expressed. And if this piece goes forward, the next piece that I would do is I would actually draft a model procedure that then could be presented to the school committee. The school committee can make the determination whether that model procedure reflects their expectations for the school department when we conduct hiring of the specific class of contract employee.
Well, the advisory, I mean, you took essentially the advisory approach in here.
Well, with no contradiction at all of the state law, and I
Yeah,
try
I
to
mean,
throw
that's-
in whenever possible.
The administration has been criticized because it was taking the authority from the school department, the authority given by the law to the school department. And so that's why it was criticized.
The
We
administration
talk-
was
we talk about-
criticized by you, however, the rest of us pretty much
Yeah,
felt the
rest
state.
rest of you guys are elated.
No, the person, we
Yeah.
took the state advisory as that, a state advisory and interpretation of the law. We're not
Right,
lawyers,
go on.
we
So-
go
so
by.
okay, let's look at the state advisory. This was issued right after the ed reform, November 1995. So it says on page 3, it says future legislation may clarify the statutes relating appointments of the school business administrator, administrator of special education, school physicians and nurses, and supervisor of attendance.
Has there
so
been
this
future
is,
legislation?
That there is the legislation, the law says this is a school committee appointment. And the advisory that was issued 1995, so it's 18 years ago, they said future legislation may correct these.
And has there been future legislation?
No, it hasn't, so
Well, that's
that's
why-
why what the law supersedes this, because this was just issued in 1995, no follow-up.
This, what I gave you doesn't contradict the law. It reflects the law, and it reflects,
So if it
The
reflects
recommendations
the law, then why don't you live with the law?
we do live with the law, we don't violate the law.
Well, I'm criticizing the administration for not following the law.
And
Well,
I do, I
we
do,
haven't
I don't
contradicted.
have the same criticism.
I know, you guys are related, that's
No,
the
we are
issue.
not elated, and you are putting words in my mouth, and I really, really resent that. The law says that it is the school committee's hires directly the superintendent, and we are essentially the approval body for the hiring of all these other positions. We're not doing that?
I didn't bring my law book.
I didn't
If you
either.
look at
The law
the
says-
nurses, the section for the
It's listed right
nurses, 7153, that doesn't say, superintendent just picks the nurse and then brings it to the school committee
So-
without any backup.
If I could bring it back around,
Business administration, what is it, this business,
well, the business manager.
manager, doesn't say that you just give a one week long notice in the paper and then hire your friend. I mean, we have
Oh,
serious
I'm
issues
sorry, you're
here.
weird.
Well,
Serious issues here.
Yeah, we do have serious issues.
Dr. L, this is the reason why, is exactly the
Sorry.
reason why I believe this is an
Yeah.
important policy that we put in place. Because what this does is this solves the problem. Nothing in this policy is contradicted by state law. It reflects state law. It reflects what we've been told by the Department of Ed is a good hiring policy. It is in the interest of ed reform, reflects the intent of ed reform. In this policy, it defines everything, and basically it says, if there's an opening, the superintendent notifies the school committee, the superintendent gives a process, the school committee can change the process, the school committee can define their role in the process, the school committee can put their people in the process. It's what it says. So what I'm handing you in this policy is the ability of the school committee to take total control of this process, if they so choose to. So as a school committee policy, because this allows you, as soon as you receive notice from the superintendent, to say, all right, show us the procedure. All right, this is the procedure we want, this is how we want to interact with the procedure. So if you wanted to take over the process of hiring, like me, an assistant superintendent or deputy superintendent, you could take over that process. If you wanted to be incredibly involved in the process of hiring a nurse, you could be. If you wanted to go that route. A district-wide nurse. This also says, I mean, I did put in here that if it's a building level position, the principal should be the person making the recommendation, and I don't think any of us would argue with that. But this gives you the power as a member of the school committee, or as, I should not say, as any individual member, but collectively.
No, I said, nobody would argue with the hiring of a building-based nurse, but you
No.
did. You
Well,
argued
No,
about the
see,
hiring of the
well,
high school
think,
nurse.
I think what Jonathan is trying to do here is, qualify the law. The law is clear. The law, I
But
wish
Clearly it
I
is
had
not.
brought my school nurse.
But it,
It's a school committee appointment. Maybe we are saying the same thing. It's just how the
Well-
superintendent acted
But
in
every
the
law-
last few hires.
but every law
But the,
is open to interpretation. And what ends up happening like for instance, in our situation is we have different people interpreting the law differently. I know that when, as a member of the school department, when we interpret the law, we look at the advisory. Because the advisory is by the Department of Education attorneys, they're interpreting the law for us. So we've interpreted as we've been told to by the Department of Ed. That's our fallback position, wherever there's an advisory out there. The last thing we used to do is contradict an advisory from the Department of Ed. You're just opening yourself up for criticism in a CPR or a PQA or a district review or whatever it might be. So in this case, with this policy, what I've done is I've interpreted it in terms of letter of the law. I've looked at the Department of Ed advisory. What I've done is specifically put in the role of the school committee so that this doesn't have to be an issue that keeps coming up in school committee. Because I honestly believe that when we have these issues that don't have to be issues, when in fact, I mean, we're hiring good people and we have well-defined processes, it does nothing but discredit the hard work that people do in a public forum. In what I've done here, Dr. Urelt, is I've actively intended to address your issues in a fair and equitable manner that I believe that both sides of this issue at school committee can get behind so that we can define this process. You know exactly what to expect from the school administration. The school administration knows exactly what the expectations of the school committee are. We have something that reflects state law and the advisory from the Department of Ed, which is important to the school administration to meet those requirements. And that we can address all these issues head on. So that when the next process comes around and there's one of the employees that's covered by this particular provision of state law comes up, that the school committee will be provided notice. The school committee will be able to look at the process and define the process to meet their expectations. The school committee has the capacity to put a member of their board, multiple members of the board on that hiring committee, so that there's never going to be these issues in the future. That everybody understands what the expectation is. The superintendent understands what the expectation is. The school committee understands their role and their capacity to influence the decisions, and that we can move forward and continue to do the good work we do without this getting in the way, and I think in a big way causing people to question our credibility in terms of performing good hiring, living within the letter of Massachusetts general law. And these things I will tell you, are very important to me. I mean, I'm a by-the-books kind of guy. I like to know that we're doing things right. I spend a lot of time ensuring the fact that everything that we do is done right and meets expectations not only of the state but of the community. And I believe I think this is the most important thing that we have on the docket by a lot in terms of meeting expectations and maintaining our credibility in the community.
I disagree because the law is clear. You don't need, Jonathan, Mr. Ford's interpretation of the law and the, marriage of that with the old advisory. Now, there are unquestionably, improper hiring practices. We need to improve those. I look at the latest the Facebook person, that was supposed to be a community relations committee. They were supposed to meet, interview the candidates, inform the school committee. None of that happened, and they haven't. That committee at that meeting we had, they said they met, and then they changed their story.
The committee did not
But the
meet.
issue
The
is,
one of the many members of the committee was on the interview panel because she was available. Dr. Brown is not available during the day when the interviews were being done, so there was never a formal committee meeting, but one member of the committee was involved in the interviews.
at that, we have that on video record. They said they met, and then
And
they
I'm
changed their
telling-
mind. But the question is, again, the hiring policy. So we had a community relations committee that was supposed to do that. they haven't. Now we have none of the subcommittees meet, and then we have this policy subcommittee charged with the broader thing of organizing the policies together. And then we bring this hiring policy thing as an emergency nature policy, and I resent that. I'm not stupid.
Well,
What do you think?
I resent the fact that you're implying that that's what I'm thinking.
You're trying to legitimize the misconduct.
I'm not in any way trying to legitimize misconduct. You know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to address your concerns, and I'm trying to put in a
You're
fair...
not addressing my concerns, sir.
Well, you know what, Dr. L., I believe that if we clearly define this policy, and school committee's role is defined, the superintendent's role is defined, school committee has the capacity to play as big a role or a small role in any one of these areas which are required to be appointed by the school committee. You know, the community relations person is a required school committee appointment, it's an employee.
No,
So superintendent could hire that person.
It's a school committee's budget item.
okay.
It's
It's
a
just,
school
the law
committee's,
doesn't, the law doesn't require that.
cover that, so if we're
But
covering what, yeah.
If we're talking about the employees that are covered by the law, that are defined in the law as school committee appointments, and we're talking about the process, that is what this policy covers. And this addresses all the issues. This gives school committee a defined role, it gives the superintendent a defined role, it talks about what everybody's responsibilities are, and it gives the school committee the ability to be as involved or uninvolved in the process as they like after receiving notice from the superintendent that that position or a position subject to their appointment becomes open. So, beyond that, I don't understand what more anybody could possibly want in terms of a policy reflecting hiring of these
Well, I can
particular pieces.
talk to you about the specifics of the
Doc-
problems that I have with the
Well, Dr.
recent
Earl,
recent appointments.
but
and,
this isn't about recent appointments. This is about moving forward and solving this problem.
Well, this is not solving this. This won't
Dr. Earl,
eliminate the problems we had in the recent past.
but I can't fix the past and I can't fix your perception of
I'm
the
not.
past.
I'm not
What-
saying that you fix the past.
What-
I'm saying let's have a policy or go with the law that precludes those kind of things from
Clearly-
happening.
That's what this is.
Clearly,
doubt.
there's disagreement, and clearly, you and I disagree. And I don't know that we're ever going to convince each other at this table any different. I do think that, I would refer to this as an emergency policy, but I do believe there's urgency to this policy. And if nothing more than to clear up the arguments that keep surfacing every time any of these hires are discussed, and really provide this division among the board that, may or may not be there. I don't know that we're actually speaking the same language in this case. But, an appointment to me is not my ability to sit and hire, my having the legal ability to approve somebody that has followed a guideline that is set, that we agree with, and we're the appointing, not the necessarily ever interview and screen the resumes and do that entire process. We're not gonna agree on that, and I'm fine with that. But I think that if we're not gonna agree on it, to sit and argue over it's pointless. I think if we have this, and I want you to have the chance to review it, the law and the advisory, and bring them before the full committee to discuss, I don't know that there's any other way that anything's gonna get accomplished at this table. And I would like to bring these forward at the next meeting with all those other pieces of documentation, so we can have this discussion once and for all. Have the ability to, like I said, have a full discussion. If there's questions we need to ask, if there's questions we need to ask of legal counsel, we can put them forward as a board, but this is pointless.
So why have the subcommittee then?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
we
saying
have,
that's one policy, that's one policy.
Well,
Out
you're
of this whole
just
list.
making it an emergency policy. If
Nobody
you
said
follow the law,
emergency.
then
It was
there
an
wouldn't be
emergency
any emergency.
We are following the law, I
Everybody's-
really resent that.
Dr. Earl, we're reviewed, our hiring's reviewed by the Department of Ed. We're audited, our books are audited, nobody gets more scrutiny than the public schools, here or anyplace else. What we do is by the books, our policies and hiring practices, in the last district review, I think that's one of the things we had the most accolades on. Our hiring practices were exemplary. And that extends from paraprofessionals all the way through principals and I was deputy superintendents or whatever it might be. with this policy, all I'm looking for is clarification. You know, whatever your concerns might have been in the past shouldn't get in the way of us doing good work in the future. And I believe,
I agree with that.
and I wholeheartedly believe that by putting in a policy that clarifies this piece, we can address all these issues and we can focus on other things other than the process that we use to hire somebody. I believe our time can be better spent in other places once we put this piece to rest. And I'm gonna come right back around to my concern also. When we have public discussions regarding what the district did or didn't do in hiring people, when in fact we run full process on everyone. There's no abbreviated processes on everyone. And it is the focus, we all believe it's the most important, one of the most important things we do. You know, this just needs to be put to rest. And you know, whether you're gonna agree with me on this or not,
No,
I
in principle,
honestly-
in principle, I agree, because, you know, I want the hiring practices to be, you know, unquestionable. And to me, there was a question, and I'm a reasonable guy. I mean, I haven't prepared, you know, what was wrong with this specific hire, so I wanna have a policy or a law that will preclude those kind of mistakes of the past, or, you
Dr.
know,
O, can I frame an argument for you? If you're a member of the school committee, and the superintendent provides you with notice she's gonna hire, or there's a position that's gonna become available that needs school committee approval, or it needs to be a school committee appointment. Then the superintendent brings forward the process, a draft process used to hire the person. And as a school member, you get to look at the process, and the school committee can amend the process any way they want. Then the superintendent says, you know, based on the process you gave me, we're gonna put 3 school committee members on this committee. So then there's 3 school committee members on the committee to do the screening. And then they play their role, and we go through full process. We screen the people, we bring them in for interviews. If possible, we have them model behavior, we do site visits, we do all these different things. And that person comes before the committee. So the superintendent gave notice, the committee either reviewed or wrote the process. Members of the committee sat in the process as determined by the school committee, and in the end, they're bringing forward that candidate. Does that process satisfy you?
in part, but there were issues
In the
in the
future?
past.
If this were the
Well,
future
yeah,
process?
This is a
Would-
policy
would
for
you-
the future.
the,
Would you support in the future that process, where the school committee's provided notice and they can control the whole process moving forward if they so choose?
Not completely, because, again, the issues I had was to do with, you know, not providing the information when requested, or not providing sufficient information.
So
So you
if-
can have.
If in the
you can-
process,
In here, okay, let's see what you wrote, I mean, what was written here. It says, school committee, on the recommendation of the superintendent, may establish the position of and appoint an assistant associate deputy superintendent who shall be report to the superintendent. The superintendent recommends to the school committee candidates for appointment to the position of assistant associate deputy superintendent. The committee shall approve or disapprove the appointment, but shall not unreasonably withhold its approval. What does that mean?
That's
Unreasonably
state law.
withhold? Upon the
Direct quote.
request of the superintendent, the committee shall explain its disapproval of recommended candidate. The committee sets the initial compensation on an ongoing base rate of increase of the assistant associate deputy superintendent's salary. And then the superintendent manages the hiring process. I mean, this is not the law, this is the
this is,
advisory.
this is
the
both.
That's the
advisory.
this is
policy of the
both.
community.
In fact, the piece that you asked me to, what does this mean? That's directly taken out of state law. The part
That's
that you
taken
need.
from the advisory.
No, that's out of state law, I believe. To ensure, this is the piece which is specifically targeted at meeting your concerns. To ensure the hiring process is transparent and reflects identified best practices, the following requirements will be established. The superintendent will provide the committee with notification when a position requiring a committee appointment becomes open. The superintendent will utilize an established written process when conducting a candidate search. The process is subject to review by the school committee. The school committee, based on a majority vote of the committee, may elect to have a member serve on a search committee for a position requiring committee approval. The committee member will participate in the hiring committee as defined by the established hiring process. So basically, the school committee tells the school committee a position's open. The superintendent presents a hiring process, subject to school committee approval, which means that you can change, review, and amend the process in a way you like. by a vote of the committee, you can put your people on the committee. You can establish your role by defining the hiring process. What this says is, when it comes down to hiring one of these positions, the committee can be as involved as they want to be, or they can turn it over to administration to do their job. So it gives you the right, as soon as you receive notice, to control the process and participate in the process, which is exactly what you're looking for. So there's never any question,
No,
never
but,
any question over
Frank-
what the process was.
Frankly, I mean, if you ask the school committee, current school committee, the majority is happy with the
Are you
superintendent's
speaking for the
performance.
entire school committee right now?
But Dr.
Well,
Mill,
I'm just
No, you
talking
are.
frankly.
it-
Yeah, I mean, you look at the
No.
performance, the evaluation reports, look at the goals you have, I mean, it's obvious.
That's not the
Everybody
topic of
is,
discussion
Dr.
for right
Rock,
now.
But
Totally
you,
separate.
you asked the question, I answered
No.
it.
if, when
The,
a process comes up in front of the school committee.
For the
it becomes-
transparency of the process is, if a member, asks for information, that information is provided to him.
Well, the way the
But
school committee
school
works.
committee, in
No.
the past, they said, we decide that Dr. Urol doesn't need this information.
No, that is not,
Well, no.
you're not totally representing that correctly, in that individual members don't get to demand certain
No, I wanna see
processes.
information.
Individual members don't, the committee gets to instruct the superintendent, but oftentimes when one person goes off and they have what appears to be something that is totally counter to what the committee has voted, the superintendent doesn't have to answer to every individual's request.
Well, then if she doesn't,
She answers to
want
the
the
committee.
criticism, she better
That's not-
provide the
That's
information.
not,
Otherwise, the
but we're talking about the
criticisms.
past, can we
stay.
talk about this, because I think this is more than fair, I think it sets up a method by which every future hire has the school committee's ability to do the input, and this is what I'd like to bring forward, because I don't see, I think this is a great basis for conversation.
I think this legitimizes with the superintendent's modus operandi, and I
To
really don't
involve the school
like it.
committee? That's
Dr.
what I don't
That's,
get.
that's not what this is saying, I mean, did you read it?
Well, I'm reading what he just handed us.
Yeah, it says superintendent select the candidate, and then
That's
for
just cor-
school nurse,
Okay.
I read this when you first gave it to me a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
maybe 3 weeks ago.
But Dr. Earl, this is what you see is you see a blend of advisory and you see a blend of state law when you read this. The piece that was specifically put in this for you specifically to address your concerns is the hiring process. So it says the superintendent manages the hiring process, but it says that you get to provide oversight on the hiring process,
It's
which
these
is a
three
written
bullet
process.
points at the end.
Yeah, because the superintendent does manage the hiring process. She's gonna set up
Chief
the
executive of
interviews,
the
she's gonna
school.
collect the committees, she's gonna do the paperwork. I mean, that's how it works. But what this says is you get control of that process. So while it says here, the superintendent manages the hiring process, selects the candidates for X, Y, and Z, it says you get to determine the process. It also says that you get to put yourself in the process. You know, it's giving you what you want. And I can't imagine a scenario when a school committee hire is coming up and a member of the school committee asks to be on the hiring committee, that anybody would ever
I
say
know.
no to that.
I agree.
Excuse me?
No,
I don't.
no, have you ever been denied the ability to sit on an interview committee if you were, I mean.
I didn't even know there was an interview taking place, what are you talking about?
The point
What are you
is,
talking about?
the
The
point is-
nurses, we just bring
okay, let's talk about the,
not
let's,
even a resume.
let me talk about the nurses specifically, because the nurses are private employees. They are, if they're working for a local hospital, a local doctor, they don't, it's not like the hiring of the superintendent, which is a purely public process. They have the expectation of a certain amount of privacy that they're looking for a job. This allows them that, this allows them to create a process by which the interviews are done behind closed doors with the school committee member involved, as per the new guidelines. Mind you, I'm telling this, doesn't apply to what was done in the past. And then you can bring that with the school committee person there and the director of nursing and the superintendent, bring that appointment forward to the school committee with the comfort level that if you are the one who feels that you need to know who the nurses are that are applying, you can put yourself on that interview committee.
But I didn't know, even though there was an interview committee, I didn't know when was the interview.
No, I'm
I
talking
didn't
going
see the
forward.
resumes coming in, so you're saying mistakes have been made?
No, I'm saying the appointments met the letter of the law.
No.
I'm saying this makes it even more desirable for,
But
to answer
in-
your
And
needs.
Dr. Earl, even in this, if we use the school nurses for an example, we would give you notice, and under this piece, you'd be given notice that we're gonna hire a school nurse. But it also establishes the fact that that process should be run by the principal as opposed to the superintendent. So we would bring the process forward, you can look at the process, you can be on the committee, but we believe that would be, the principal's right to select the right nurse for his building. But if we had like, for instance, like Pat Small's position, which is a district-wide position, that would be a completely different animal. Because that would be, that would be a district-wide hire, and it would be a process similar to like hiring like a business manager, or a student support services, or an assistant superintendent, or whatever it might be. I mean, I think that when we look at these things, and we look at full process, we're really talking about district-level employees, and whenever we have a building-level piece, although this would allow for the process to be reviewed by the school committee, which would be different than what we normally do, and, they could sit on the process, we would be then empowering the principal to talk about who's the right fit for my school, because schools are communities, and different schools look for different things as members of their communities. And, finding the right fit, but it wouldn't preclude you from being the process. It would be an expectation that you'd work with the principal, or as opposed to maybe working with the superintendent, or the assistant superintendent, or whoever it might be, or members of the community, whatever that group looked like if you're looking at a district level position. So I mean, that is a caveat that is in there that comes from the model language. But in the end, every one of these hires the school committee would receive notice from the superintendent. The superintendent would bring forth the process by which the person would be hired, and I've showed you how detailed our processes are. I mean, you can't deny that we have a detailed process for doing all these
For
things.
the high school principal
Yeah.
Hiring?
Yeah, and,
I like that, but
it's,
again, that's not a school committee appointment, so
But-
I don't have any
but the-
problems with the law says it's, the superintendent's or the, principal's duty, so I'm not trying to interfere with that. All I'm looking for is transparency and, more importantly, accountability, which
And-
we do not have.
and in fact, that's exactly what you get with this. So you get
But
Complete.
Jonathan, I read it carefully and I don't see that here. It's still open to abuse.
I respectfully disagree. I believe that this reflects a good blend of the state law. In fact, it is the state law. It's taken directly from the advisory from the Department of Ed as well as state law, and with a specific component in to create transparency and to allow the school committee member or members to be directly involved in the process of establishing the procedure by which we hire a person and to fully participate in the screening and full process all the way through the point where they come to school committee. And I don't understand how anybody could I don't know what a process how you could have a more transparent or inclusive process than that for any one of these hires. I don't know what we could possibly do
Jonathan,
professionally to open up the door anymore on this.
Jonathan, I looked at it from the perspective of recent events that I have criticized, and I mean those can still be done according to this what you wrote.
So Dr.
So
O,
that's why.
So we're where we were half an hour ago. Can we bring this forward?
I disagree. I mean, if you
Well,
want to
then
do
where are
it,
we gonna go with it?
you pull a rank.
it would be a vote of the subcommittee,
If
wouldn't it?
you have a conflict, you can vote.
What's that?
And the subcommittee is actually just you and me.
Well, it's the three of us, isn't it?
And it's not crystal clear, but like I said, if what it takes is pulling rank, I just don't understand, that's not what I'm trying to do.
Abolish the subcommittee.
That is not the point. Where are we gonna go with this? If we bring it back next month, where are we gonna go with this? How much further along are we gonna be? We've all got our arguments on the table. I don't think there's anything more that any of us can provide to say, this is how I
Well,
feel.
I could write a dissertation about
Well,
this vis-a-vis the recent hires, and then maybe you
But
can
again,
see my point.
this is a policy that we're trying to, if you wanted a change in policy, this is what he's saying it is. I believe that, and again, I'm not even gonna go there because we're just going to disagree, we're gonna continue to disagree, and a month from now, we're gonna disagree. I would like to bring this, along with the policy or the law, the advisory, and any other material you feel that is pertinent to this discussion, to the meeting on Tuesday, so we can have this as an open discussion. If there's anything you need me to ask of legal counsel, I'll do it before Tuesday. I don't know what else to provide, because we're not going anywhere with this. It's 9:30. I'm not feeling well. I would really like this to be,
Well, I hope you feel better, Joyce.
yeah, well, I do too. I've been sick for a couple days.
I'm glad you're sitting over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I can already feel myself starting.
Yeah, but I really would just like to find resolution to this that isn't just tabling it so we can disagree again. There's one thing to table something because there's research to be done. I think we've exhausted the arguments on both sides. Please, let's just put this on the agenda, which we may end up tabling it because we don't have the information on Tuesday, but at least continue the discussion.
And Dr. Earl, I want to say, even if, whatever our disagreements might be on this policy, I do want to say that this was as good a faith and effort as I could put forth to try to find a
No,
policy
you and I talked, and
that
I told
addresses
you-
all the things that we talked about. I want to say honestly, I don't really know how we could amend something like this to make it more transparent or to give the school committee more opportunities to participate.
Okay, maybe next Tuesday, I mean, I still disagree to bring this to the full committee, but if you want a full rank, then we'll do case by case study of the previous hires, and then see if this would have precluded that.
Very well. Your prerogative.
Okay, so, do we have any other matters?
Don't know how we could.
Do we have, do you wanna set up a meeting date, or,
You know, I actually would like to hold only because I don't have the town meeting schedule. And we're
actually,
going-
then Jonathan is also going to, get us a time scale for the, getting this into PDF and stuff, buying the PDF. Maybe we'll just talk
I'll look
about,
at the buying of the
in
PDF.
principle, we'll meet
Yeah.
in about a month.
A month,
Well,
but,
can
but
I-
it's-
Can I have Mary
Also
set it
run-
up?
have-
I'll just have Mary set up the whole thing.
Yeah.
sure,
Maybe she can contact all of us.
yeah.
Well, what I
wait
was
a
saying
sec,
is,
yeah,
we got a couple of, steps that we need to take care of.
Well, if you let me know,
So Joyce will know the cost,
Yeah,
and then,
that's
you'll get us a cost estimate and authorization from the school committee if
What
it's a big expense
Well, I'll
to
talk
buy
to,
it.
I'll talk to Maggie and see what where we can go in terms of the amount of money that we could possibly spend, get an idea of what a paraprofessional costs, see how many hours we can throw at it. And that may or may not have a firm number for Tuesday, but, we'll start the
well,
process.
I would say initially, just see if you're gonna PDF route, let's go.
Yeah,
If the
yeah.
PDF route goes through, then we'll go to Plan B, and we'll just pursue this alternative.
Okay,
We'll set it
but
up.
I am concerned about a month from now being in the middle of FinCom subcommittee and
That's true.
hearings and whatever, so I don't wanna pick a day that I know will most likely change. I'll talk to Mr. Hill and
By
see
the
if I
way,
can get a
FinCom did
schedule.
reverse their
Heard.
decision yesterday.
They did,
Yeah.
I heard, yeah.
And there was a very good presentation by the, Mr. Kelly. Oh, town manager did the presentation.
Oh, really? I was at the energy and sustainability meeting.
We thank very much to our gym hero for staying so late, and Mr. Ford.
Is this meeting
And-
over?
Oh,
Sustain
yeah,
it.
adjourn.
So now we go into executive session.
No, we didn't, not on the
I'm
agenda.
kidding.
And then I can cough on you.